I call myself a generalist. I had to run my own business because there wasn't a business like the one that I wanted to work in, so I created it myself. They've got to trust me. I have this rule, what goes on in the shed stays in the shed, full stop, end of story, because people share a lot of personal stuff with me. I have had people literally break down in tears. I've had people ranting and raving, having the time of their lives and everything in the middle. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't even class myself as a business person. I'm changing the world. I'm absolutely on a mission to change the world one person at a time.
Sarah, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming. It's such a delight to have you. So, tell us about your business and what you do.
So I kind of class myself as not just a personal trainer. So I work with business owners and entrepreneurs who kind of put the business and their family and everything else first and neglect themselves just a tad so they're not thriving. And I kind of help redress that balance for each and every individual, whether that's physical, mental or emotional. So yeah, it's a little bit of a strange setup. So we start with physical stuff and work on the mental and emotional balance as we go.
How did you come up with this idea of...
Oh, I know. This is crazy. So I've been on a bit of a journey, and the Southey Way is a direct result of the journey that I've been on. So long story short, I'll try and keep it short. I had a really great corporate career and a really great boyfriend who got the opportunity to go and work in America and asked me if I'd go with him. We got married, went over to America. I couldn't work over there, and it was a bit of an issue. We were there 5 years. We came back 5 years later with 2 children and a healthy dose of depression for me, because I don't know, having kids really messes with your identity. You lose your name, you lose the ability to be identified if you're out on a social thing. I did find that when people asked what I did and I said, I look after the children, they'd kind of glaze over and walk away. So I got a big case of depression, and that lasted, I call them like my black 10 years. And it got to the point where I was really struggling to hold everything together. And I kind of reached a fork in the road, and I realised that I needed to do something about it and find myself again. So I literally went hunting on the internet for somebody to help me. Now, I'm quite a feisty person, quite like outspoken and straight talking. So even when I was feeling my worst, those traits were still very strong. I didn't want anybody that was going to tell me what to do, tell me what I should do. I wanted somebody to help guide me. So I would talk, they would listen, and kind of together we would steer and find our path that would work for me. And I couldn't find anybody. And at the time I was running actually a garden design business, because garden plants don't talk back. So I was very in a safe environment. And the Southey Way was set up as a direct result of not being able to find somebody to help me, so I had to do it all by myself. And it was a really hard road to travel with no support and no real clue as to what was going on. Until one point I was with a business mentor, and I said, you know, it was about social media, and we were talking about, if I find plants on social media dull, you know, why would I post about them? And she was like, you're all over social media, Sarah, with the sport that you do. I'm like, yeah, but that's for me and my personal space. She said, why aren't you doing that? And within 24 hours, I realised that I'd come far on my journey, and I was now in a position to help other people do what I'd been looking for like 8 years beforehand. So 24 hours later, I'd given my garden design business to a friend of mine and set up the Southey Way. So called because I had to do it my way, and I help other people do it their way. So that's why it's the Southey way.
And how do you do it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I have like a membership formula. So I call them my Southey Way superstars. And they come to my shed. One of my clients told me I wasn't allowed to call it just a shed because it was so much more than that. And I gave her the opportunity to name it. And she said, I think it's the shed of strength. And I went, perfect, because you know what that abbreviation is? It's S.O.S. So that's just, it couldn't be better. So the shed is where we work out of. It's a magical, really safe space. It's got all the gym equipment you could possibly want, but it's also got an armchair. And so when clients come up, they tend to come and see me once a week. They come up and I literally know as they're walking up whether it's going to be a hard gym session, whether it's going to be a gym and a chat, whether it's going to be major chair time because something's going on in their life. But the formula of it revolves around how did your last week go? Where are you at now? How's the next week looking and what do you want to focus on? Because the one thing that I find that business owners don't have and don't do is a regular weekly focus on themselves, space for themselves, time for themselves, to actually take time out of their lives and think about actually, am I on the right track? Where am I going? What am I doing? So I'm not like a business coach. I'm not like a life coach. I'm not any of those things. I'm a really good pair of ears and a kind of like a magnifying glass that focuses in on where they need to pay attention. And that's kind of what we do on a week in, week out basis. It's really interesting.
It seems very interesting. It is, and it's kind of the first time that I'm hearing something like that exists. And it's a very crucial one as well. Regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, I think we all go through a phase, especially if you have children. We definitely go through a phase, and as add on top of that, having a business, and now you have a lot of responsibility all of a sudden, and then you need this safe space, and you need some time for yourself, and it is something that a lot of the times that we ignore.
Yes.
And it's just we don't have the time for it. We don't even think about it, and it's very important to have it, and it seems like you are offering it.
That is the thing. I don't think there's anybody else quite like me out there, which is brilliant for me and brilliant for all my clients, but I think there should be more. In fact, after lockdown, I set up I call it my shed socials, because there's so much pressure on us as individuals to succeed, to keep pushing, to keep doing. And I found that a lot of business people, entrepreneurs, business owners, they don't talk in detail at home about troubles that they're having at work, and they don't talk at work about any kind of troubles that they're having at home. And actually having an independent place to come and just share. So after lockdown, I realised that people were in their heads far too much. And I set up this Shed Socials, which is a once a month opportunity. We literally hang out in the shed. I get chairs. It's very bizarre. We're like eating tea and cake and sat around having a little mini tea party in a gym. But I think it's really important and it works really well. And you did mention, so it's as much for the men as it is for the women, because, they don't have the opportunities. Women are natural talkers in general. If I was going to be, generalising, men don't have that opportunity. Their culture, the way that they've been brought up, certainly historically, has been, don't show any weakness, proper men don't cry, all of those kind of things. I would say I'm 50-50 now. In fact, the last Shed Social I ran, I think me and one other were the token women and the rest were men, and they love it. Because given an opportunity, who wouldn't love talking about themselves? There's no agenda, there's no, who knows where it's going to take you? And that's the beauty of having a safe space with no agenda.
Absolutely. What is the most common problem that people bring on the table?
The most common problem, I think, would be priorities, as in balancing them so that they are still part of the priority, as opposed to being the one that completes and takes all the actions for all the other priorities. I think as individuals, we should be our first priority. You cannot run a successful business as successfully as it could possibly be if you are not prioritizing yourself. Because when you break, and you will, because burnout is a thing, various stages of it, you cannot then complete all the things you've committed to, whether they be family, friends, work, any kind of community commitment. So we are our own linchpin. So it's so important that we look after ourselves.
Is there a divide between the issues, or the most common issues, from the where women on the women's side than it is on the men's side, or is it like it's regardless?
I would say I can only talk from who I've worked with and how I've worked with them. Yeah. The demands are the same. The way that each individual reacts to them is different. And I don't know, culturally, women tend to say yes and then try and squeeze everything in. So I think they create their model of I'm not good enough because they can't literally do everything that they've said yes to. I just think I'm a real individual person. So I've got male clients that literally have exactly the same problem. Maybe it's more work focused, the pushing and the pushing and the pushing to make a successful business, as opposed to what is success and where is that measure? Is that measure an internal measure of success, or is it an external validation that you're looking for? So that's their version of saying yes, I guess. Who knows? I kind of just look at the person that I'm talking to and go, how do we best make it work for you?
Let's take a few steps back. You talked about an identity loss. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit? The reason why I'm asking that question is because it seems to be a very common thing that I keep hearing from different women, especially those who either have a business or are working, and then after having children, things change, and suddenly you're born as a mum, and then you were a different person yesterday, but now you're a different person. And then to find this balance and to find who you are, that's going to take a while, and sometimes it might take even years. What is your experience about that, and what would you say about the loss of identity and the importance of doing something about it to find it? And
I don't think, from my experience, I was a different person. I think the perception of other people of me was different. I have my kids in America. So when I was pregnant in America, they've got a very different approach to the UK. And it's quite a handsy approach, if I'm honest, which was quite invasive. And it's very preachy where I was about what I, as a pregnant woman, was allowed to do. And people would tell me what I was allowed to do. So from the minute, I was clearly pregnant, they would tell me what I should and shouldn't do. Well, we've already discussed that I'm not great at taking those kind of unrequested shoulds and shouldn'ts. So that really set me off in I am more than just my stomach. But of course, there is a lot of hormonal changes, a lot of physical changes that you go through when you are going, when you are pregnant and you're having babies. It's also, as soon as somebody gives you that baby, whether you've given birth to it or whether you have adopted or whatever the version of your parenthood is, the expectation is that you now know what you're doing as a parent and you've got no clue, no idea. And it's like you've just spent the last however many years finding out who you are, and now all of a sudden you've got to park that because you've got this crying, screaming thing that is demanding your attention 24/7. It's exhausting. So you lose your identity because you've got this baby, and it starts with the mother-toddler groups when they go, oh, it's so-and-so's mum. Because you lose your name, you just become the mum of... So my kids are called Ben and Jenny, like the ice cream almost. It helps people remember what my kids' names are. So I would be referred to as Ben's mum and Jenny's mum, not Sarah. So just, you don't realise how much identity you have till somebody takes your name away. When you get married, as a woman, it's expected, well, less so now, but you take your husband's name. So I don't even have my name at the end of the name that I just lost. So I'm referred to as Mrs. Southey. You know, that's not me. I'm still Sarah. So your identity loss starts just slowly. It's kind of like a slippery slope. All of a sudden you wake up one day, well, it happened to me, you wake up one day and you go, who on earth am I? You know, nobody really knows who I am because I'm either, you know, Jim's wife, Ben and Jenny's mum, you know, so-and-so's daughter. You just get referred to by other people. You don't, I chose to stay at home because it was so expensive for childcare, and basically because I decided that if anybody was going to mess up my kids, it was going to be me. So at least I knew what kind of problems they were going to have. Not my ideal role, as it turns out. You know, you look at your job description, it's really not a lot of stuff that I like doing. So I wasn't best placed, shall we say. But I did it. They've both made it into their 20s and they're still alive. And they're decent kids. And I'm really proud of them. So I did a good job, but it was at the detriment to myself. And I think when they hit secondary school, I decided enough was enough and had to do something about it. It's a weird one. I think a lot of women do go through that. Hopefully it's going to get better. Who knows?
Do you have any, based on personal, experience purely, would you have any advice for, a woman who is going to go through the exact same thing?
Oh, that's a good one. Do I have any advice? I would say, no matter what role you take on, take the time for yourself. It's something that, I was such a giver. I did everything for everybody else, and I literally had no time for myself. And I didn't do anything outside of these mother-wife roles. So, any time that I did take for myself felt incredibly selfish. But if you've got that foundation before you put yourself in that situation, and then you hold on to that foundation, I think that is great because you hold on to the essence of who you are. It's really hard to dig them out, that essence out, once it's got buried under all the life stuff. I call it real life stuff. It kind of squashes you down sometimes. So I think, our energy has to be allowed to live rather than just suffocate under all the real life stuff.
Have you had anybody, since you started your business, have you had anybody who's gone through the same thing?
Oh, so many. So many. It's really common because I think the emphasis, I'm 52 years old. So I'm from a culture where, a time where you really didn't spend time on personal development. You didn't look at your life and go, okay, so what can I improve and what can I not improve? It was you do this, you do that, you do the other. And this is your expected path. And if you've got any problems, deal with it. Just, you know, don't talk about it, just deal with it. So it's a real work in progress for me to be coming back out of that. I mean, I think I'm a very different person now than I was before I had kids. I think now people are talking so much more. You're talking about mental health, you're talking about neurodiversity, you're talking about, you know, the various differences that make us so unique and so brilliant. It's all being talked about now. When I first started the Southey Way, I ran road shows called Lift Your Mind. I did them for the Mind charity, just to raise awareness, and nobody was talking about mental health when I started 8 years ago. And I did this whole connection between the physicality and the mental health route. So the more you lift, the more you train, the better your mental health gets, because that was the journey that I took, and I found it really empowering. Halfway through those road shows, the royal princes came out talking about the counselling that they'd had around their mother and all of that kind of stuff. Literally, it gave permission to start talking to me. So one half of the roadshow, people were kind of like not making eye contact, avoiding me. And then literally that interview happened and people started sharing their really personal stories. And it's a privilege to be in the situation that I'm in, to listen and have that opportunity to hear how diverse people are, and yet how similar the problems can be and how hard it can be to come back out the other side. So I think the more we talk, the better. And I think everybody's got stuff that they need to deal with. I'm just glad that we're all looking at it now and you know, not, you know, spending hours and hours on it, but giving it the time that it deserves. I think it makes a huge difference.
How did you become so good at listening to people? Because I think it is a very important skill to have, and not many people have it. And certainly you have it. How did that happen? Were you always like this? Did you become like this? And how do you listen to? Because it's very important to the other person to know that they're heard and without judgment. So how do you do that?
That's really key, that last little bit, without judgment, because I think a lot of people listen so that they can get their point across. I find people absolutely fascinating. I think it comes from being really nosy. Everybody's got a story, and stories are innately interesting. I grew up in a family house, Irish roots. We shared a house, me and my brother, my parents, my mum's parents, and my mum's mum, all in the same house. So you can imagine family meals were interesting. My family are quite feisty. I don't know where I get it from, but growing up, they had very distinct views on life, and they were quite political and quite vocal about expressing their views. And at the dinner table, there would be quite a lot of shouting. And I think growing up, I learnt to just stay out of it, because if I voiced my opinion, I would find out in no uncertain terms either why I was wrong or why I shouldn't think like that. It was very opinionated. There were a lot of issues created by my just taking a step back and being quiet. But I think that's possibly where my listening comes from, because it's fascinating. If you don't engage in the conflict, because that's what I saw it as, conflict, you learn an awful lot about people. So yes, I do still have an issue with conflict and arguments, and you'll find that I don't often share my opinion on controversial subjects. But I do love listening to people, and I find what they say fascinating.
Going back to your business,
Mm-hmm.
so when you were describing it, you said that it's a gym, but then there are tables there, and then there's a sofa and everything. So clearly, what you're focusing on, you're not just focusing, exactly as you also mentioned earlier, not just focusing on the body, you're focusing on mind. How do people, because it's also a very new thing as well, isn't it? It's relatively new, and to have these two important things linked together is a very key factor, and you've managed to do it successfully. How do people see it, and how do they deal with it in a good way? Deal with it, like, because I'm guessing that when you find out, you have this option to do this and also do that, it excites people, doesn't it? Because now you don't have to just go, to a gym to just do a workout, or later on go to a coffee shop and just sit there. Everything is there, plus people, like-minded people that you can just share things with, and they have you as well to listen to them as well. How do people find it? Because it is something completely new.
It's really interesting how it works, and I do like talking. You might have guessed that. I quite like engaging in those conversations. The physical and the mental aspects are intertwined. You cannot separate them. So no matter, even if you just went to a normal gym, there will be mental aspects to every physical challenge you put yourself through in that gym. There is mental chatter going on constantly. There's the comparison with the other people. There's the push and the shove. There's the fighting to hide from the cameras in gyms at the minute. It can be a very challenging place. My little shed, because it's just one-on-one, it's really easy just to chat. And I do find that when people are exercising, and when they know me, when they're comfortable with me, because it's got to be they've got to trust me. I have this rule: what goes on in the shed stays in the shed, full stop, end of story. Because people share a lot of personal stuff with me, and it's important that they know that I will never share that with anybody else. I have had people literally break down in tears. I've had people ranting and raving. I've had people at the top of their game, having the time of their lives, and everything in the middle. I don't have a specific time that I do. Right now we're going to talk, and now we're going to exercise. There's literally, they come through the door, we go, how was the last week? What are you feeling like it's going to look like this session? I have a plan, obviously, but sometimes, I did it today. I literally drew a line through the plan and said, right, we're not doing that today. We're doing this because this is going to best serve you today. And I call myself a generalist. So there are counsellors out there, there's therapists out there, there is 101 different professions out there that are specialists in various different things. But what a lot of people need is a cheerleader, somebody that's going to go, yes, it's okay, it's normal. Somebody that's going to go, have you thought of this? And send it. My main mission, well, I have several, but when somebody comes into my shed, my main mission is to have them leave better than when they arrived, whatever that means. Because my main mission, I'm changing the world. I'm absolutely on a mission to change the world one person at a time. Because every person that leaves thriving can then create their own ripples in life. And they will then go on and help in whatever their industry is, wherever their family and friends are, their positivity will go out into the world. So I am changing the world, and every single person that works with me, or even comes into the shed and doesn't work with me, leaves happier than when they arrived. And that, I think, is a job well done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in that case, how do you see the future of your business? Because it's a very important thing, and it's a shame that it's only, it's only happening here, and it's just one of you doing that. what is your ambition? What would you do? You see that expanding, and then you helping others to do the same thing, and we have more of you and more of your shed, all over the world eventually.
It really does create an interesting proposition. So I did a little mind map a couple of years after starting the Southey Way with all my grand ambitions, and like, if it could be anything in the world, what would it be? And I had, writing books on there. I do talks and that kind of stuff because, it's a great way to help spread the message. I'm not for the masses though, because I like individuals. I think the impact that I personally have is one-to-one or one to very small group. I do it online. So thank goodness for Zoom. Interestingly, when the pandemic hit, I'd had to have a big operation. So I'd already set up my company so that I could run my business via Zoom. So literally, I had my operation, the pandemic hit, and I was already good to go. It was fantastic. And then spent 2 years sat at a desk looking at a screen like that. So I worked really hard through the pandemic. So I'm less keen on a prescriptive, download my program kind of thing, because I think that loses the essence of who we are as individuals. But I do have on my dream list like a franchise of Southey Ways. I think with the right people, it could be an amazing thing. So yeah, it is on my list. I have beautiful cover for if I'm not able to provide, in the shape of my daughter, who has a portfolio career. So she's a PT and a CrossFit coach on one hand, and on the other hand, a graphic designer and an illustrator. Because I think gone are the days where you have to have one job and do that for the whole of your life. And because she's grown up with me and seen my journey and lived her journey, she's brilliant. So if I could just get a lot more of the mini-me's. Do you know anybody that's like a mini Southey? I'd happily work with them. I'd happily introduce. I think it's such an amazing opportunity to get people thriving, that the more I can do things that get that message out there, the better. Cloning?
Cloning, yes. That could be an option. No, but that's actually a very interesting point. So for whoever is listening or watching, I think, if they can do it, would they come and talk to you maybe? Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're only limited by our own imagination, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So you never know where this life's going to take you. I also think it's really important to know what your individual version of success is. So I have to be very careful to practice what I preach and to make sure that my thriving is still happening. So any kind of grand plans I have to come into that net of, is it worth compromising a little bit of who I am or what I've got to give to get to another place? So everything is measured against my happiness and my thriving. So yeah, my way of working is not for everybody, but for those few that get it, it's a beautiful thing.
I have a question for you that goes back to your the conversation we had earlier.
Right.
At what point did you become Sarah again?
I became Sarah again when I went on this physical journey. So the depression and anxiety that I had was so restricting that the only times I left the house was when I had to take the kids somewhere. And I wouldn't go out on my own. And I vowed that, if I was going to carry on in this life, something had to change. And I literally set myself tiny little steps each day. And it was literally steps. Walk to the end of your path. turn around, come back again. That was safe. It wasn't too threatening for my mind. Okay, so the next day, let's just see if we can reach the first lamppost. That led to doing a bit of running. Not a fan, but you know, it was my in. Eventually, my journey took me to CrossFit, and CrossFit is my absolute passion. It absolutely suits me down to the ground. It is a sport that anybody can do, and it takes the pressure off how you look and makes you value your body and what it can achieve. And it was quite liberating for me. And I think that helped me find Sarah again, because it was, even though the kids went and did CrossFit, my husband eventually went and did CrossFit because he said he was a CrossFit widower. It was my thing, and I would go off and do competitions and stuff. And I think I started to feel Sarah coming back then. But because it's always a journey, you can be as obsessed about exercise as you can about cake or drugs or alcohol or, you know, any one of 100 things. And I did take it too far the other way. So it was a little bit excessive. I mean, I can say that I had a six-pack. I can say that I was super, super fit. Can I say that I was happy? No, because I still thought that I was ginormous and I wasn't as good as everybody else. So I wasn't back to being Sarah fully, but, you know, I kind of knew my name. It was getting there. I don't think I got back to Sarah until about 6 years ago, when I gave up worrying about what anybody else thought. And that, I tell you, is the most liberating thing. And you get to choose everything that you do based on what you want, not what's going to make other people happy.
Do you remember how you got to that mindset?
How did I get to that mindset? I got to that mindset by literally choosing where my battles were going to be. For instance, when I was bringing up the kids, I was also responsible for the house, for the cooking, for the cleaning, for, you know, all of the above. Then I started working and I was still responsible for the house, the cleaning, the cooking, all of the above. We had a conversation at home about responsibilities, and everybody lived in the house, a family conversation. I'm not just picking on my husband. And we said, everybody lives here, everybody's got to pull in. You've got to pull your weight. It's not just my job. There are no blue jobs, there are no pink jobs. There are just jobs, and we've all got to do them. Because I was a gardener, garden designer, I would come home from work and I would go and do the garden, which was just exhausting. So I said, could you help me do the garden? And they all said, yes, we'll help you. And then they didn't. So I just decided one day that I was going to go on strike. And I did. I went on strike and I stopped doing the garden, because if they didn't care about it and I was doing it so that they had a nice place, who did it matter to? Why was I putting in all this energy to something that nobody else was prioritising? Then I discovered the power of a strike, and I went on strike for the dishwasher, the cleaning the kitchen floor, the bathrooms, you know, literally anything where I just wanted to make a point that, do you know what? If you're not going to notice that I'm doing this, I'm not going to do it. And that kind of snowballs once you start getting that, oh, well, I don't have to do it. The only person that thinks I have to do this is me, so why am I? So yeah, we don't get a cleaner, unfortunately. We just have a very dirty house. But that's okay. I've got 3 adults and 3 spaniels at home, so even if it was clean, it would be dirty 24 hours later anyway. The shed, however, is immaculate, because that's my space.
Yes. I was expecting that. So there's something that, you know, many people think, and this is when you are a businessman or a businesswoman, and as soon as they hear the word businessman or a businesswoman, or I have my own business, or I have my own, or I'm an entrepreneur, suddenly it comes to the listener's mind that, oh, you've got it all, you figured it out, now you're on top of everything, and you're successful, you're happy, you're rich even. And we all know that this couldn't be far from reality. And of course, that means you are not that in the sense that you're not happy and you're not successful, but it wasn't like you woke up one day and suddenly you are successful, or you woke up one day and suddenly you figured everything out and you're on the peak of everything. There is a really long way to go, and there are a lot of ups and downs.
Yes.
You deal with a lot of business owners. What would you say about these things?
The journey is a rough ride. You got to want it. I never wanted to run my own business, ever. I remember saying in my teens, in my 20s, it's all good because I'm never going to run my own business. And then I got purpose. And it literally was a light bulb moment for me. I had no choice. I had to run my own business because there wasn't a business like the one that I wanted to work in. So I created it myself. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't even class myself as a business person. I class myself as somebody who helps people, because I would do this whether I was working or not. And I think that driver drives me through the ups and downs, through the what ifs, the how can I, am I making enough to cover my bills? Am I making enough to pay myself? You'd be amazed at the number of people who run their own business who don't even give themselves a salary. What does that tell your brain? Does that tell your brain that you're worth it, that you're successful? Does it tell your brain that what you are putting out into the world is worth paying you for? Because unless you're owning that, don't run your own business. I think it took me years to realise that paying myself was validating, that it literally told me, oh, you are good at this. Because if you're doing what you're doing and you're making enough money to pay yourself, then that means you've got clients, and clients pay you. So I've never been driven by money at all. Don't give a monkeys about it, quite frankly. What we do for a hobby outside of work, we live in a tent on the car, we go off-roading, so, quite literally basic living. But I think you've got to have your own purpose to get through the ups and downs. I don't know a single entrepreneur or business owner that hasn't had the ups and downs, that hasn't had to decide what they're going to sacrifice to make something look like their version of success. People do look at me and think that I do have it all together. I absolutely don't, and I will freely admit that I absolutely don't, because I think it's important. I don't know anybody that could say, oh yeah, I've got it nailed. I know it all. It's fine. Here's the secret to life, the universe and everything. Because if they do say that, they're lying and they're hiding, and it's not authentic and it's not transparent. I cannot sit here and say, yes, it's all hunky-dory, roses around the door, because it's not. Do I love what I do? Yes, I do. And would I do anything else? Absolutely not. I think I'm actually unemployable now. So I've got so used to doing whatever I want, whenever I want, that being told what to do would literally end in tears, and they wouldn't be mine.
And this is a very amazing position to be in, isn't it? Because a lot of people do different things. Sometimes they follow their passion. More often than not, you use your skills and then you do something and then you move forward with that skill, which is all well and good. But then to find out what your true passion is and what truly makes you excited is something that doesn't happen very often. And it looks like it has happened to you, so
Didn't
well
happen to
done.
me for years. Years and years and years. Tell you a little story. When I was growing up, you know how people always ask kids this, it drives me nuts. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I knew exactly what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. My dad was in the RAF and he flew bombers. And I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I grew up on RAF Scampton where the Red Arrows were based. Any surprise? But it was in a time where women were not allowed to be fighter pilots because they're designed for men. So I was told that I couldn't be a fighter pilot, but I could be an air traffic control officer instead. Now, they are not even similar. It's basically this thing that you wanted to do. Well, you could just spend all the time watching people do what you wanted to do instead. Is that okay? No, that's not okay. So I then didn't know what I wanted to do. Fast forward to secondary school when things were evolving and it was acceptable for women to become fighter pilots. By then, I was short-sighted and they wouldn't let anybody wearing glasses or contact lenses fly fighters. So I'm like, still can't do it. Still don't know what I want to do. But I spent my teenage years, my 20s, trying all sorts of different jobs, going through various different experiences, discovering what I liked and what I didn't like, but still had no idea what I wanted to do. But as it turns out, when I had my little light bulb moment and I parked my garden design business and set up the Southey Way, it was the perfect time for all of those skills that I'd just spent 20 years learning to come into place. So one of my really unique ways of working is I just absolutely know that when somebody is talking with me and they're sharing an issue or a problem or an emotion, or I absolutely know that there'll be a little nugget of something that will pop into my head that will be absolutely the right thing to say. And that is my little magic. But you can't learn that. You can just put yourself out there and live life. So I think that is, even if you don't know what you want to do, living life is the thing you want to do, because you never know where it's going to lead you. And it's so much fun while you're doing it.
And the final question, if you were to give an advice to somebody who's listening or watching, and they want to start a business or they already started, what would you tell them?
Pick one thing. Don't try and do all of it all at the same time, but do the one thing. So what is the one thing that's going to move you one step forward? I would say it's I live by this advice. I help my clients live by this advice, because if you think big picture, big goals, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? If you think about that big goal, it's overwhelming right now in this moment. But if you pick one thing that's going to move you one step further, closer to your big picture, then you're moving. And moving promotes movement. Moving helps us feel great. Moving helps the mental process keep on working. So even if it's just one thing that moves you one step forward, then you're winning. And then celebrate the win. That's more than one thing. But there you go. That would be the thing. Action, one thing.
Sarah, you're such a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been fun.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.